time in the past when things happened in the world and we would turn to news anchors or civic leaders, rabbis or priests for wisdom and perspective. Now, our perspective is likely to come from Sarah Silverman, Patton Oswalt, Mindy Kaling. 2 generations ago, we wondered who would ever take the place of Walter Cronkite as the most trusted man in America. And now that throne has passed from Jon Stewart to John Oliver. Why, you may ask? How did comedy become so important? It's another great question. Thank you. Since 9/11, the world has been in chaos. Add to our collective uber anxiety a great recession, uncontrollable climate change, rampant racism, sexism, mass murder, Vlad Putin, rapidly politically correct college students, the fall of Bill Cosby, and now the very real possibility of a Trump administration. Take a moment and think about how crazy the world is right now. How just absolutely nuts it is. Look at your Twitter feed if you need inspiration. Now, imagine that same world without comedy. In a world like ours, comedy isn't just for fun. In the context of ISIS, of Ferguson, of President Trump, comedy isn't optional, it's a necessity. A basic essential, like food, like water, like Wi-Fi, like Uber. No, sisters and brothers, comedy isn't just for laughing anymore. When you look around you, it's easy to see that comedy is having a transcendent, transformative moment. From clubs, to TV, to arenas, to movies, to college campuses when it's allowed, and perhaps most importantly to social media. Comedy has become an essential part of our everyday diet. But my theory, friends, is that comedy has become more important than that to our diet. More important than even gluten. More important than chaos. Driven by chaos, yes, more important than chaos. Driven by the chaos around us, by our shared anxieties and neuroses about the present day and our looming future, driven by the power and speed of our social media, comedy has become more than entertainment, more than escape, more than a distraction. It's become our common campfire, our communal language. Sisters and brothers, friends, newsfeeders, tweets, viners, periscopers and Snapchatters, Husayers and meerkatters. I submit to you today that comedy has evolved into something much, much bigger. Comedy is now a religion. I said, comedy is a religion, and I will go further. Comedy is the most important religion in America. It is as strong, as important, as big, as organized a faith, with the possible exception of the NFL. And even more importantly, unlike any other religion, it is not mutually exclusive. You can believe in Christianity and comedy. You can believe in Judaism and comedy. And with no apologies to Bill Maher, you can believe in Islam and comedy. In fact, I submit to you that believing in any other religion actually requires you to believe in comedy, to have faith in comedy. Who among us can get through a Passover Seder or an Easter dinner or a Ramadan fast without a joke? And if you're doubting whether I have a Ramadan joke, I do. What's the best movie to watch during Ramadan? Hunger Games. Because it's a fast. That's why that's funny. If you need proof, those scriptures tell us that true faith requires no proof, Louis C.K. 3:16. Look no further than to Pope Francis. That's right, the Holy See. When he came to America, the internet went cuckoo for Popo Puffs. During his Fiat-ville visit, what went most viral? What was the thing that went most viral on social media? Was it his speech in front of Congress? No. It was the Pope Bars hashtag. To quote living internet meme Lin-Manuel Miranda, lyrical cataclysm, miracle catechism, smack him with that epistle and back to the Vaticism. Hashtag Pope Bars. What's more, Aziz Ansari has more followers on Instagram than the Pope does. And he's not alone. Even lesser known comedians regularly outstrip news anchors and news organizations and religious leaders and religious organizations in their number of followers. I didn't make that word up. That's what you chose to call them. So why? Again, audience, why is this happening? And again, I have to say that's an excellent question. Thank you for asking. Among 30 to 49-year-olds, I'm sorry, I forgot one slide here. And on Facebook, God is actually a comedian. Although you'd think God would have more followers than 2.3 million. So again, you ask why. Why is comedy having this moment? Why is it turned into a religion? And I'm glad you asked. This is the Pew Research Studies survey. Amongst 30 to 49-year-olds, none is now tied for the #1 religion in America with evangelism. And for Americans under 30, the #1 religious affiliation by 80% is met. Meanwhile, comedy is the #1 piece of content, or the #1 content genre amongst all Americans. This is a piece of study that we did with Maggot Associates just this past summer. While, at the same time, religious affiliation, any religious affiliation, is just 77% for all Americans, and only 64% for Americans under the age of 35. I am a judge. This lack of affiliation is not a lack of faith. It simply means that the faithful are looking elsewhere for something to believe in. While pews at temples and churches thin out, attendance at comedy clubs is skyrocketing. While religious revivals struggle, comedy festivals are multiplying like triples. While viewership for televangelists fall, downloads for comedy podcasts look like a hockey stick, up by 630% in just the last 36 months. Podcasts. And then when you look at attendance at comedy classes at UCB, they're up 100% over the last couple of years. 12,000 people took comedy classes at UCB just last year. 12,000 people, and they're doing 100 shows per week, every week in 2015 and 2016. Yes, President Obama met with the Pope. He's spoken at a mosque. He's also been on The Daily Show, Colbert, Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee, Between Two Ferns, and he even went to Marc Maron's garage for a podcast. All the leading contenders for president go on all the late night talk shows, including Fallon and Myers. And the biggest get in politics right now is not Meet the Press, it's SNL, hashtag Burn Your Enthusiasm. As I've said, my theory for comedy's ascendancy as our most important religion is a confluence of many factors, a perfect storm of faith, if you will. The chaos of the world at large, the eroding credibility of our most trusted institutions, the fire hose of information pointed at our faces, morning, noon, and night. Let's be honest, if we didn't laugh on the regular, we would never stop throwing up. But there are two key factors at the center of this changing importance of comedy in the world. The first is the shifting style of the comedians and the performers and the artists themselves. In short, they don't tell just jokes anymore. Their comedy, for lack of a better phrase, is more human, more personal than previous generations. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear from the faithful themselves.
When I watch stand-up, true stand-up, it's very clear to me what they have contrived. A lot of stand-up is made up. Like, they have a funny premise, and then they, lie saying it happened to them. You can just tell when they turn the switch, and you're like, that didn't happen. That's when I tune out.
I like comedy that comes from people's, personal experience. If something happens in their life, and then you really... And I guess that's what makes them comics. They see everything in a certain way.
If you're a stand-up comedy fan and you watch stand-up, there's no more pure expression. It's the world filtered through that person's point of view.
Then there's Louis C.K., which is just wonderful because he's a really sharp observational comic. And his comedy got much better once he had a family, once he had children. And just started talking very honestly, saying things that no one else was willing to say.
I actually just saw Cameron Esposito. She was great. She was able to talk about being gay and even rape in a really nice way, which sounds crazy, but it was done in such a way that she was just sort of stating pretty big stuff, but so charming and honest about it.
Maria Bamford, mostly her bits about sort of mental illness and also just emotional vulnerability in relationships. Vulnerability isn't inherently funny if people are worried about you, but Maria Bamford has managed to simultaneously be vulnerable and be self-aware and empowered in a way that makes you not worried. And I think that is really kind of an important new blend.
About comedy. They're not quoting jokes. They're not quoting bits. They talk about comedy the way a lot of people might talk about scripture. Aziz Ansari wrote a book. It wasn't a bunch of jokes or anecdotes about his life. He worked with a sociologist, and he teamed with a bunch of data scientists to create a massive survey of thousands of people. His book is a meditation on modern romance. And it's funny, but that also seems beside the point. Hannibal Buress has been doing stand-up for years, but when an old, tone-deaf, hypocritical comedian told all young black men to pull up their pants and act like him, Buress felt responsible to call him out. And that's how a young black comedian did what Hollywood and the legal system hadn't been able to do for decades. They took down Dr. Huxtable. Beth Stelling is an unbelievably funny comedian. About 2 months ago, she created a post on Instagram acknowledging that she had been abused by her boyfriend, describing what had happened and explaining how she had dealt with it and why she had had enough. Beth, along with Sarah Silverman and Cameron Esposito and Leslie Jones and Amy Schumer and Kate Berlant and Maria Bamford and countless other women comedians have torn the Band-Aids off the scars of modern misogyny and made it increasingly uncomfortable for those of us in the patriarchy. These women are definitely funny, but unlike previous generations of funny ladies, they don't seem to give a shit whether or not men think they are. There's a raw personal tone to comedy now. It owes genealogy to Jeanine Garofalo, Colin Quinn, David Cross, and many of the alt comics from the 90s. But in clubs, in living rooms, on podcasts, on Twitter feeds, and Facebook, today's best, most influential comedy does something relatively new. It tells us that despite everything out there, despite everything we're going through, we're okay. These comedians, through their confessional Instagrams and their unwieldy, messy podcasts, with their incredibly personal, strange surrealism, tell us that no matter how anxious or disquieted we may feel about the world or about ourselves, we're not alone. Or even the most fucked up person in the room. Why are so many attracted to this faith? Why are so many flocking to these churches of comedy? Because we're looking for someone to help us navigate the odd maze of modern life. Because no one told us that being an adult would be so fucking hard, and that at the Church of Comedy, our preachers are not only do not chastise us for the crazy stuff that's inside our head, they tell us that it might actually have a point. Inside the Church of Comedy, the only judgment is of judgment itself, and the only sin is believing in sacred cows. Which is why the looming threat of the reformation of political correctness is so dangerous. Comedians can only help us when they are allowed to offer an unfiltered view of the world around us. It's batshit crazy out there, and our soothsayers need to be able to soothsay that. Yes, there are lines that should not be crossed, but those lines need to be pushed far out, so that those who try to speak the truth have the room to make mistakes. Comedy is not clean, it has rough edges. In a world like ours, good comedy needs to be uncomfortable and dangerous. It's the only way it can cut down conventional wisdom. If the preachers and teachers of the comedic faith don't have leeway to step in shit, there's no way they can shovel it out of our way. As Pat Oswalt said, it's the responsibility of comedians to remain as irresponsible as possible as they choose to mock everything and everyone.
Abortion can be funny, or murder, or whatever. And I'm not one of those people. I'm always I think comedy for a lot of people is a tool for dealing with and living with a lot of horrible things.
Sort of controversial in that I think that rape jokes can be made and done correctly. I think if they're informed and done the right way, that they can be funny.
I think you can find funny in anything. You just have to be good.
Good tip. The second core tenet of the rise of the comedic faith is you. Part and parcel to the rise of this new generation of comedy has been its ability to race at the speed of light around the world, like digital missionaries. Social networks have spread the gospel of the comedic faith and allowed new voices to convert and comfort the faithful like at no time before. After all, social media audiences are called followers for a reason. Social media has made new, original voices like Hannibal Buress, like Beth Stelling, like Felicia Day, like Aziz Ansari possible. More importantly, the very experimental nature of the interwebs has helped create new forms and reinvent classic forms of comedic expression. Memes, Vines, Snapchats, Periscopes, Instagrams, tweets, podcasts, these didn't exist in the era of Carlin or prior, but it doesn't make them any less credible a form of comedy or expression. To a certain extent, form-fitting a joke into 140 characters enforces a type of discipline akin to the Type 5 of a generation ago. No, it doesn't replace the need for or the importance of live stand-up performances, but these social media platforms offer an open realm for experimentation that heretofore didn't exist. And, maybe more importantly, they help these comedy preachers stay in touch and grow their community in advance of and in between live sermons. Even more, these new pulpits have given rise to an independence from the mainstream media. In turn, the swelling ranks of the comedy faithful have created a digital cottage industry, resurrecting the comedy album, making a home for niche comedy TV shows, and creating viable careers for the previously nearly unemployable, like Marc Maron, Chris Hardwick, Dan Harmon. 10 years ago, shows like Master of None and Catastrophe wouldn't have been given a chance to succeed or fail because they wouldn't have been made. Podcasting has become the perfect forum for artists and preachers like Scott Aukerman and one of other panelists from today, Kulak, who's turned her podcast congregation into a gig creating her very own television show. And this is nice for them. But who cares? If a few comedians had to find a different way to make a living, would the world really be worse off? In the inimitable words of Paul Reiser, not so much. What's important and life-changing about this new and powerful comedy faith is how it, through social media, gives the underserved and often alienated people in our country and around the world access to voices and ideas they wouldn't have had otherwise. Imagine living in Butte, Montana, and wondering if your life will ever change. It's very unlikely that Marc Maron or Maria Bamford or Aziz Ansari will be playing Sagebrush Sands or the Mine Shaft Lounge in downtown Butte. Those are both real places, by the way. But that kid in Butte who feels like no one understands the anxiety she feels about leaving home or getting a job or having sex, she's one click away from finding solace, receiving guidance, getting a roadmap for her journey from Butte to beautiful. Music has long played a similar role for the young and alienated, but the Church of Comedy, coming across the broadband pipes, offers something more. Faith in comedy comes complete with a slew of psalms and one-liners, tailor-made to beat back hatred and bigotry, misogyny and stupidity. Rock and roll and rap are great rallying cries, but comedy is actionable, and great comedy can change minds. If you don't believe me, listen to Maria Bamford talk about mental illness, or Tig Notaro talk about cancer, or Moshe Kasher talk about addiction, or Sarah Silverman list her 10 tips for preventing rape. For the comedy faithful, comedy has become an expression of who you are. What you think is funny, and who you think is funny, is a shortcut to saying what's inside your head and how you see the world. Do you get it or not? And despite the backlash of political correctness, social media has created a safe place to practice this new religion. This is not to downplay the anger or ugliness of the manosphere. Often, the internet can be the ultimate manifestation of male rage, a digital form of the Salem witch trials. However, the majority of social media offers comedians and their faithful a haven, a church, in which to experiment on the fringes of fun and share ideas and moments in private before trying them out in the real world. These outposts allow comedians the opportunity to speak to their followers without always having to worry about revenue, about having to focus on return on investment. Unlike other media channels, social media gives comedians a chance to fail well. Comic preachers can stretch the boundaries of humor without having to focus on a punchline, and audiences can fall down a rabbit hole of twisted comic thought jazz without having to put enormous sums of money out that they do not have.
I like really silly, absurd kind of stand-up.
The topic doesn't really matter as much as like what a comedian will do with the topic, like how far he or she will take it into like an absurd realm.
Socially awkward stuff. The unexpectedness, I guess, with comedy, when you don't know what's going to be said, or taking something out of context and making something inappropriate or just strange. Subverting social norms. Tim and I are very weird and off-putting stuff.
I have watched a substantial amount of this content, Sisters and Brothers, and I can tell you firsthand, a lot of it sucks. But it's the permission to suck, unapologetically, without fear, that allows room for actual breakthroughs. Now, despite my testimony here today, I'm sure that there are skeptics among them. You may be thinking that I speak in hyperbolic tongues, and perhaps I do. You may be thinking, yes, comedy is popular on social media, but after all, it's not brain surgery. How is it actually changing people's lives? Again, an excellent question, audience. So let me give you one last example, less theoretical than my young girl from Butte. This is a recent email from an actual human to the comedy squad at Earwolf, the podcasting company. So I'm reading this person's email. I'm 27, French, and living in Paris. A month ago, I was at the Bataclan, a concert hall where the terrorist attack happened. I was there with my brother and a great friend of mine, dancing happily to the great Eagles of Death Metal when things went really, really bad. We were extremely lucky, and all three of us got out unscathed. We managed to hide in a small room for close to 3 hours, put up a barricade that held even when they tried to get in, and waited for what seemed like forever while gunfire and bombs went off from the other side of the door. As you can imagine, it's not easy to get back to real life after this unreal experience. The fear of PTSD, flashbacks, nightmares is constant. Every semi-loud noise is startling. Nowhere feels safe but home right now. For a month now, before bed, I get anxious. Street noises amplify, and I'm apprehensive about what my brain is going to do if I let myself drift off. So I put in my earbuds and I listen to your podcasts, warding off bad thoughts and images with laughter until I fall asleep with a smile on my face. And for a month now, it has helped me sleep through the night without fail and kept me from going insane pretty much. I don't know how I would have handled it otherwise. And I'm not saying that I'm out of the woods, but for now, it's been my haven. So I just wanted to share this with you and thank you from the bottom of my heart. I think you deserve to know how much good you do. You've all brought me unrelenting joy for years now. But now it's different. And life is different and harder somehow. And just having those moments of calm, clear, peace, and just laughing so hard at your masterful silliness has been a giant relief in my day. All because of a podcast. Yes, comedy may be funny, but in the world we face today, and because of the technology that you all represent, it is not just a laughing matter. The comedic faith may not fix what's wrong with the world, but it does have the power to laugh at it as it goes down the drain. So that's the end of my speech portion. Now I'm going to bring up our guests. Recently, I, along with a small band of pilgrims, built a new altar at the Church of Comedy, and we call it CISO. He says CISO, but the sound's not up. Luckily, we've been able to attract some of the most important, inspirational, and influential practitioners of the comedic faith to our congregation, each of whom brings with them their own legion of loyal, someone might call it rabid followers. Before we bring them out, I want to show a piece of their work to each one of you. Sister Kulop plays Nurse Kulop on Children's Hospital and has appeared in Parks and Rec, Reno 911, Bob's Burgers. She's also co-host of the enormously popular podcast, Who Charted, and is the creator, showrunner, and goddess of the new CISO show, Bajillion Dollar Properties. Here is a look at Bajillion Dollar Properties.
What do you think of this place?
I think it's gonna go to
Shut up for 1 second.
I'm going to take on a partner. Just wanted to say I think we have a beautiful office, and it would be a shame if something were to happen to it.
Don't go down this road. That's not good. We met in rehab. Yeah, rehab. We met at it because we both drove and crashed into it.
I will sell it for $8 million, and I will not cut off your balls.
Oh man, this is some Game of Thrones.
What you doing here, mister? Think I don't know what you're doing?
Please welcome to the stage, Kulop Bilesak. Brother Jonah is the host of the Nerdist podcast, Meltdown on Comedy Central. Will be starring in the new reboot of Mystery Science Theater 3000, and is the creator and star of our new CISO show, Hidden America. Let's take a look.
You know, I felt out of all the music, really outside of alt country and ska, that blues is the one that's connected with me the most.
Well, that's because you can find the blues anywhere. You have to go to Scotland and find ska, or England, or some other place, or Boston. But the blues you can find any place, anywhere, anytime, anywhere you want. You can find it on the outside or on the inside. You can find it in a person or in a donkey. It's the blues.
All right, yeah, I want to hear some more blues. Give me some more.
I was a man with a home in a place where everybody knew my name and everybody knew my face. But I had to get up and leave when my wife took my place. She took my son. I moved back home. Now I'm a doctor on the radio. Now ready to get off the couch. Yeah, get off the couch. Yeah, my brother, sweater vest brother, both time brother, toss, egg scrambled egg, toss, egg scrambled egg. erasure. Okay, whatever you call it, man, that's the blues. I'm just telling you what the blues is. I totally get it.
Please welcome to the stage Jonah Ray. And last but not least, Brother Daniel is the creator of some of the strangest and best TV ever, including Heat, Vision, and Jack, The Sarah Silverman Show, and of course, Community and Rick and Morty. He is creator and star of the Harmontown podcast, which he turned into a documentary, also called Harmontown, likes his own name. He is currently creating and starring in a brand new, very unusual CISO show called Harmon Quest. Here's a backstage look at Harmon Quest.
And I know there's some people that jump out of planes, hunt animals, socialize successfully, make love to strangers, charm snakes, run for office, invent gadgets. I mean, I don't do any of those things.
It's all been good, but this is the last one. I got a terrible feeling.
We just wrapped the first season of Harmon Quest, and it feels great.
Oh, it's so good. I signed up for tickets, and I came and was laughing with tears in my eyes the whole night.
It's been nerve-wracking and rage-inducing, and it's made me sick and want to vomit.
Now we go home and start drawing cartoons to go with everything we did.
It's pretty great.
Erin meeting.
She's super talented.
Yeah, I can safely say it went well. I didn't die. I didn't get anyone killed. And somewhere along the way, I'd like to think I learned something. I'd like to think.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Harmon. So we can space out a little so we can see each other. Let me ask you a question.
There were clips of my show too.
There were clips of your show too. What?
The show, the actual show.
The show itself?
Yeah, I thought.
Yeah, but they would always cut to animation.
Right.
I mean, we don't have the animation yet. We'll have to talk after.
It was a good teaser. I'm excited.
It's weird. It's a bunch of people say we just did a show. It was great, and they're like, "What?"
Yeah. See, now there's intrigue there.
Thank you very much. So let me ask you a question about the basic pieces of what I just said. What has the internet meant to what you do as a comedian or as an artist? Kulap, you started a podcast called Uncharted. That was not necessarily part of the overall plan for your career when you started it out, was it?
No, I thought I would be a dramatic actress. And pretty soon I realized that wasn't going to be the case, that I thought comedy would do. Doing a podcast for me has completely changed my life because I guess it entered discipline into my life. I do it once a week. I don't know any reason why I wouldn't do it. I have a platform now where I've gained confidence. It's made me feel accepted, and from that, I think it's helped me be bold about other things that I'd like to do, like doing a documentary and going to meet my birth father in Laos and doing bajillion-dollar properties.
Which is, now you're show running bajillion-dollar properties. This is the first time you've show run.
Yeah.
Show ran.
Yeah, I created it. I'm an EP, I'm a showrunner, and then I was like, you know what? Why don't I direct?
But the discipline of creating a podcast helped you kind of gain that momentum, no? Or yes?
Absolutely. I think as an actor, this is not a good habit, but I think I would go into a room and go, okay, I need to change myself to what they think I should be. But much better actors know that's not the case. To be someone who's a podcaster, I mean, people respond to me just being me and me. It's not about jokes per second or per minute even. It's just about me being relatable and me being honest.
And Jonah and Dan, you both are very active on social media, and in fact, you've been doing stand-up for a long time, but then you got into both podcasting, and you're very active on social media. Dan, same thing. You were a showrunner first, and then got into social media. What has these new platforms and these new communities and these new outlets meant to the work that you do? Either one of you.
I mean, for me, it was doing stand-up for a while. You know, I'm not that good at it. I get by, but it was, when I got into podcasting, I was able to relax and be as funny as I could be just because I was hanging out with friends. And that actually, when people started hearing me in that way, it was nice to have a fan base grow out of like the way I'm funny naturally. And that was
I'm remembering you doing one of your first stand-up sets.
Yeah.
He bailed at like 30 seconds. Do you remember this?
Yes, I said I had like a whole set list and I ran through all the jokes because I was so nervous, and I didn't stop for laughs because there probably weren't going to be any, and I didn't want to let reality sink in for one second, so I just sprinted through the set and then said, thank you, good night, and then walked out of the, I still do that after I do a stand-up set. I walk directly out of the building and down the street.
For good luck.
Yeah.
His friends were there to support him. He just was like, oh.
Yeah, I find I am so shame-based. The fact that I do stand-up comedy is just a fucking nightmare to me. I don't know why I do it. Even if I do good, I just drive home going, what's wrong with me? Why do I need this? I'm a loser. But yeah, CISO's been real great, real excited.
Really glad we gave you a whole show.
Yeah.
Dan, you have this ongoing relationship with your audience. That is, how would you describe your relationship with your audience on and off TV and on and off social media?
I mean, a biologist would say symbiotic. I think a psychologist would say codependent. Passers-by would say weird. It's sort of like I don't know.
What's your fascination with it? I mean, we were talking just a couple minutes ago, you try out new social media, I mean, more so, we're somewhat the same age, I'm a little older, but you dive into new platforms like Periscope and all these other social media head first. You were Snapchatting backstage. I can't necessarily get my head around it that much. What drives your interest in it?
Well, you said I started as a showrunner, but then got into social media, and that's not really true. It's just that's when people started knowing who I was. I've been, since there was even anything resembling an internet, I was fascinated with becoming like a digital person. It may have something to do with, and it's tacky. I'm not diagnosing myself with anything neurologically specific, but having read Steve Silverman's groundbreaking book about autism, and it makes me now able to say it's the autistic parts of me, without being tacky and diagnosing myself, that I think are I've just always been so much more comfortable being a creature of screens and text. My most prolific writing got done when blogging became a thing, because it was permission to. I never journaled before that, but then once there was this concept that you were somehow putting yourself out there, it's a weird Mel Gibsonian kind of like desire to destroy yourself. I think I think like it's like this self-loathing, like, this is who I am, this is who I am, this is who I am. Hate me, hate me, hate me, hate me, hate me, hate everything you're gonna hate about me, because I think that having autistic traits and growing up on the playground, the first emotion you learn is shame. And I think the second one is like fear of ostracization, because you're constantly, the first thing you experience that's negative in a social context is a bunch of people suddenly revealing to you that you're not doing the right thing, the right way. Whether it's like, for me, it would be like, I'd be peeing at the urinal and my underwear would be around my ankles, and everyone would be like, you haven't learned to pee like a human being yet. Why aren't you looking at everyone else peeing? And stuff like, just like there's just a million stories like that where you're just like, oh, I'm not picking up on like primatological cues, but when life is a transcript, everything becomes so comfortable. I'm only not a virgin because there were computers when I was 16. I'm only now proud to be married and divorced. I was able to pull off a marriage because there was such a thing as text messaging, and as soon as FaceTime got invented, we kind of broke up. because it was like she was like, look at me, and I'm like, I won't. I don't want to. So I just it's really all linked to that for me. I've always been like, yeah, just wanting to pour myself into a text and video based cup.
And while there was a tremendous amount of information in that answer,
there was way more hand gestures.
Yeah, answers, but there's a unifying theme amongst, like, there was a lot of self-loathing in your answer, tons of self-loathing in your answer. We haven't gotten into your self-loathing. I appreciate that.
It's deep, guys.
Yeah. But there is this therapeutic nature to comedy now, which seems to be because of late night Twitter storms, tweet storms, and Facebook and all these other things. That it's the perfect moment for comedy through social media and comedy off social media because of the kind of confessional, personal nature of it all. Or am I off base?
No, it's an interesting thing because when you say something, Twitter, for me at least, is just, once I have the thought, I tweet and I don't really think about it after that. And, it's a really kind of just, it's your head just, is tweeting, not your actual intelligent brain. And you'll see the response. It's like sometimes people go, wow, I didn't know that about you, or that's really messed up. I don't unfollow. And that's happened to me a few times. And I was just, wasn't trying to be divisive, but it just kind of narrows the people that like you and don't like you, and it kind of gets a lot of that work done. As opposed to, like, when doing stand-up, it's like you got to kind of tell people who you are, what you're about, and then you get into the stuff that's a little, more interesting.
But comedy didn't used to be about who you are and what you're about. I mean, to a certain extent, maybe, but the classic days of early and then 80s comedy, was much more observational stuff, not about yourself. But now it's substantially much more about you, and then therefore the audience.
No, it was more unspoken. I mean, I think Richard Pryor never said, I'm the voice of this or that, but... Right, and then meanwhile, you had a bunch of white dudes in sport jackets that were the voice of normality, supposedly. I think that was the tyranny of one-way media, and then social media makes it possible. That's why we're having this eruption of, like, the age of the straight white male as villain. It's like there's a healthy, that's very healthy, because it's sort of like before that it was sort of like, oh, our perspective is called, it's like normality, and then everything else is diversity and that kind of thing. And so I think that the reason why comedy is becoming increasingly personal is because audiences are fragmented, and whether you don't have to consume the person that represents you biologically, people are tuning into people as if they're little radio stations. You go like, oh, I'd like to hear what Cameron Esposito has to say so that I don't make a fool of myself next time I'm talking to a lesbian.
Well, is there, and do you make fools when you...
I still do, especially when I'm talking to Cameron.
Actually, you put Cameron and Rhea in your show.
Yes. Their storyline is called Celesbians, Celebrity Lesbians.
Hashtag celebrity. But that is, I mean, is the internet or is social media in particular? I think there's a lot written about the ills of it. But do you see a good part? What do you take away that's positive about social media with regards to the immediacy and the intimacy that you have with your fan base?
Well, I think an old story that I used to tell myself was that I am alone, and my problems are, unlike anybody else's. And for me, the internet and podcasts and listening to podcasts is that when people speak so much about themselves, they speak about me and vice versa. Right? And so for me, and my sort of growth as a person is to bring some kind of this stuff that I thought was dark and unlovable, and bringing that to light. And how I deal with that stuff is through comedy, but to be able to communicate in both ways and speak both dialects is freedom for me.
Jonah, I mentioned it during my speech there about political correctness and kind of the policing of humor or thought that seems to go on with regards to stepping over certain lines. Do you feel that when you do live performances or on the internet?
Yeah, for sure. People are a bit hesitant to laugh at something that's going to maybe come off as offensive, and I've noticed it more increasingly through the time I've been involved in comedy at all. and it's hard because I like to not like cross the line for any like I'm going to be the truth teller or anything like that. I just think it's funny to like have little bits of shock here and there. And it is weird when people will like refuse to laugh. It's like you'll get a lot of people going, I'd laugh, but it's really offensive. Like, fuck you. Like, that's it. Laugh first then. It's like, there's a noise you can make instead of just saying something funny. It's fucking ha ha ha. So.
We were at that.
What an angry
Philip and I were actually talking about the Los Angeles episode. So Hidden America is a spoof of a travel show. And we were talking about the Los Angeles episode of your show.
Yeah.
There were 2 words in it.
Yes.
That there was a big debate over whether or not to include those words.
Yeah.
Both words had 2 G's in them.
Yeah, they're both real bad words.
And so, I mean, and I very much was on the side of let's not wait them. Whatever we do, we need to be consistent.
Yes.
And so the question is, where does propriety live in comedy today? I mean, does it have a place, or do you push the boundary as far as you can, see what breaks, and then pick the pieces up?
I think push until it breaks. Don't worry, because you're not gonna go as far as you should if you're worried about going too far. If you're gonna go, you do something as hard as you can, and then it breaks, and you're like, all right, not that far. But a little bit before that, then we're in the sweet spot.
Great.
Yeah.
That's like that fella said, if you're good, then that's it. When we're talking about political correctness, we're talking about fashion, which is not a bad thing. Fashion like moves in directions and things, and we have a fashion to the way we communicate. It goes in and out of style, to say certain words for shock value, and then it becomes everyone's doing it for shock value, and then it's not shocking, and then there's a backlash that says, like, knock it off. What are you doing? This isn't risky for you to say, so why are you saying it? You're just part of the problem. And I observe all those kind of fashion movements because I'm trying to communicate, and I try to stay out of trouble, and I find that is funny enough for me to try, because I fail miserably. I think, though, that, like it's obvious, like, if you're a young comic, and you decide, well, I'm going to blow people's minds because I'm going to not be politically correct. Well, is that how you're funny? Is that what you do to make yourself laugh? Or do you sit in your dorm room and just say the N-word over and over again to yourself? If you do and you're hilarious and you make yourself laugh doing it, let's see that on stage and defy us, because they are the only thing that can defeat tyranny of any kind, whether it's actual milquetoast tyranny of the status quo or the tyranny of political correctness. The only thing that overcomes that is, that's fucking funny.
Right.
And so, but don't force.
There's a difference between being politically correct and funny and just being politically incorrect to be politically correct.
Yeah, I mean, it's like there's 85% of all jokes are terrible, and if a bunch of those are also politically incorrect, then you're feeding the demon by letting people just, play that on a loop and going, this isn't funny, see? So, I mean, but that's never going to change.
So I think we'll open it up to questions from the audience, if there are any. Are there any questions from the audience? We'll start with you because I can see you. I'll repeat your question. Good. Go for it. What's your name? Cool.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes.
But I'd like to say
to try to.
but I wish I would also say to journalists, like, can you please help us out? Like, why should the mantle go from Cronkite to Jon Stewart to John Oliver? Like, there's something wrong with that. And I think John Oliver would be the first person to say, this is ridiculous. Why are comedy shows now the way that you
They didn't. Who would?
That's what's really creepy, and it's insane. I mean, like, it's just like I think journalism like threw in the towel too fast. Like, you're a consortium of really educated people who are really passionate about this craft, and just because the actual physical paper went away, you guys just went like, fuck it. Like there's a market for. It's like create like a little private organization that puts a seal on a website that purports to be news, and if the seal's not up in the corner, then it's horseshit.
There's an issue with that though. Is that kind of assumes that they all made the decision at the same time instead of kind of slowly going blind accidentally altogether. And one is a choice, and the other is kind of responding to the circumstances around you. The biggest issue is that we got so scared about not being fair and balanced by someone who was incredibly unfair and balanced that now we have to show both sides of every conversation. I think that's my take on it, but that's kind of it. Do we have another question? Sure. What's your name? Great site. She works for Decider.com.
So my question, I really liked how you were all talking about how social media has opened up the way and changed the way that you talk about comedy or write comedy. I was wondering if your streaming network kind of does that in a similar way, or how it's different from network TV.
Well, I'll turn this over to the artists, but there's no censorship on it. There's no advertising, so there's no censorship.
Hence those words he was talking about in my episode.
You're gonna love them.
And in each case, each of these shows is as blue a piece of content that I've worked on. If you look at UCB show, which we just put up last month, there's a whole sketch of people eating cold cuts off themselves, which you never would have done on broadcast or even cable television. So it acts a little bit more like premium. So there's that, but I don't know. Each of you have worked on other television platforms, and I wonder how you see it different working with us.
I mean, for me, it just feels like it feels more appropriate. I mean, I think all television in general, even basic cable, is moving in this more John Landgraf direction. I mean, before things started actually being about streaming, he was the one who was speaking the way that people are starting to speak now, which is basically there's less money, there's more jobs. Here, like, don't worry about a pilot presentation. We'll order a bunch of episodes. There's just more laissez-faire. Like, let's gamble on a tried and true contractor. Make me a show. We all know there's no science to it. It's going to hit or it's going to miss. If you miss a bunch of times in a row, you probably won't be able to find as much work. And it's sort of like it just seems more honest now. It's cheaper and it's honest.
That's actually an excellent point. In each one of these cases, we bet on the artist. No pilot. We went straight to series with each one. And we just bet on the artists themselves. And in each case, it was an auteur, a comedian auteur, who and on Cameron and Maria have a show, the UCB folks. So that is I think, more specific.
The difference is I've noticed from working with CISO than any of the other TV networks I've worked with is that when you get notes, it's like, network notes are coming in. Everyone just goes, what are these going to be? What are we going to have to do? What are we going to have to change? Every time I got notes from CISO, it was a testament to like what they're talking about, just letting the artists do what they want. And getting notes from CISO was like getting notes from one of your producing partners, like another creative entity in the team of making the show. And that was something I had never experienced before working with any network at all. So that's a huge part of it.
So one note that we got from you for my show was you wanted to make sure my ex-wife didn't feel exploited by the design of her animated character. because she had kind of a chainmail bikini on.
That was specifically my and apparently she did not.
No, I texted her and she said, feminism is not covering the female body.
Yeah.
Right. That's great news.
I just think about you.
Yes, you do. And I've got
What's your name?
You have to tell me once you figure it out. Tell me more.
What number are you? Oh, you.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You got the wrong number.
It's just
Revenue stream? I mean, it's advertising.
yes,
right?
it's money. It's the
Yeah.
answer is money. I mean, the effect that you're describing is just capitalism. Television was a way to make a huge amount of money, whether you were passionate about television or not. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, twice as much, 15 years ago, 3 times as much, whatever. And with that, you have this creepy archetype, this top-feeding just monster who doesn't give a shit about TV, doesn't watch TV. When they do, they don't watch it as if they're a viewer. They watch it as if they're watching a horse race, or they're speculators, and those people are just vanishing. They're going away, and TV's getting better and better and better and better and better because there's less money flowing in, and so the audiences get a little smaller. And the business strategy that makes a basic cable network succeed now is the business strategy reflected in CISO, which is just like, let's just get your Vince Gilligans and your contractors that are tried and true, and just give them a little bit of money to like entertain a smaller group of people.
In 1972, the #1 show in America was All in the Family. 67 million people watched every single week, not the special episode at the end of the season, but every week, 22 weeks. And we watched me, Henry, and Archie argue out the most important issues of the day in front of you, and you talk about it the next day. We've lost that common campfire to a certain extent, but what we've gained in exchange is the ability for an audience to talk to a very specific audience. And that's a lot better than I'm trying to appeal to all 4 quadrants. You play on the maps. I mean, there is a place in the world for The Voice. There is a place in the world for Big Bang Theory. There's a place in the world for Thursday Night Football, and those are mass audiences, and that's what's happening in the megaplex. Cable, streaming, these types of things, we don't have to worry about Nielsen numbers in the same way, and so we have the luxury of catering to. I mean, I worked on a great show called Portlandia. Jonah works on a great show called Meltdown. The audiences are significantly smaller, and by the same extent, we get to say more particular dangerous things because the advertising. So I think there is a yin and a yang to it. I don't think the networks are going to go away. It's just the individual audience is going to be smaller. We have time for one more question. What's your name? Maddie.
Advertisers. Oh, sorry. Is there a place for advertisers in your like in the CISO business model or in the more fragmented content model, and like kind of I'd love to hear from either of you guys, like what does that look like? I know ideally people are like advertisers not to care, but like have you been in situations where you found it to be like really, really resourceful, even with those kind of like corporate?
Which one of you do advertising as part of your business? Yeah, I mean on the podcast has that.
Yeah, I do ads for Squarespace.com.
What is Squarespace? Do they bother you about your content?
No, they're great.
Jonah, you do stuff all the time for branding partners, yeah?
Like Nerdist will have advertisers like BlueApron.com, and there's also though there's a kind of a crappy part of that. The branded content is a bit tricky. There's a lot of sites out there that you have to come up with a good sketch or short film, and it also has to include some kind of new gum or new sandwich or burger, and then so you make something that just kind of has it in, and they're like, no, you got to talk about it. You're like, talking about a burger isn't funny unless you're talking about how shitty the burger is. And then they're like, well, no, it's a great burger. You're like, yes, of course, that's what you think. And so because like you can't make someone laugh by like complimenting them. No one's ever gotten a laugh by going, nice jacket, thank you. It's never happened. And so it's like branded content is kind of detrimental to comedy, I find.
Yeah, I think it goes back to what that guy on the screen said about dangerous comedy. If the advertising is good.
Right. Well, increasingly what you're seeing now, Pepsi, Chobani Yogurt, Marriott, I've been on panels with these, like there's really specific companies that, and we'll see how much of them are paying lip service and how much of them are going to commit to it, but the new model is going to be all of these companies have money. Studios don't need to be anything but a pile of money anymore. So what we're hopefully going to see, and I welcome it, is Nike's just going to say, we're going to make shoes and a little bit of TV. And just don't wear Adidas in our TV shows. You don't have to. It doesn't have to be Nike presents Breaking Bad. Just thank us on the red carpet. That's what Pepsi said. They're really committing to this.
I think that's the right answer. Is that you have to trust in the artists. I think if that's what brands want is connection to artists and audiences. And I think if they trust in both the audiences and the artists, there is a great place for this. They were the birthplace of all television. Soap operas are called soap operas for a reason. That's all the time we have. I think I've actually gone long. Thank you very much. I hope this was good for you. Thank you.
Well, this is where we are. We're watching it on a screen. See you in a few minutes.